What is good, guys? Welcome in here to Kurt Magoosh and Slaughterhouse Sports, and today we are going to talk about JT Daniels. JT Daniels transferring to West Virginia. Gonna provide you what I think of the move of JT Daniels embarking on a journey and going to the state of West Virginia, and just being there with Neal Brown and Graham Harrell. So I really think that a lot of Graham Harrell's recruitment to West Virginia was the ability to maybe target JT Daniels, considering even though Neal Brown spent a year in Lubbock, Texas, they never interfaced, Graham Harrell and Neal Brown. And Neal Brown at West Virginia, I'm gonna look up actually his record, Neal Brown, his coaching record at West Virginia, because I don't even know if they did make a bowl game against Minnesota last year, but it was probably 6-6. Yeah, it was 6-6. He won 6 games. They're 7-18 overall at West Virginia. 7-18 overall at West Virginia. So, this is a team that even with Dana Holgorsen, they were winning 8 games a year. With Rich Rodriguez, you had the Pat White years. I think Slater, of course, you remember Tavon Austin and Geno Smith. So those were some really fun, high-scoring teams that I'm trying to even recall where they played before the Big 12, but I think it was the Big East. They played Rutgers in the Big East. I don't know if Maryland. So it wasn't. I don't think it was the ACC, but I think it was the Big East. Pittsburgh was in the Big East. Rutgers was in the Big East. So a lot of teams still in football were in the Big East Conference, but they'd always play Pittsburgh in the backyard brawl, which I think they're going to start reintroducing that again. But it was great rivalries. But Neal Brown, Dana Holgorsen had something going at West Virginia. Dana Holgorsen had a fun team in the Big 12. They would score a lot of points. That they were pesky. You didn't want to play at West Virginia, and they'd win like 8 to 9 games a year, at West Virginia, when you think of Dana Holgorsen. And I'm even curious to go back to some of those offenses, but even Oklahoma, those are tough games when you went to Morgantown to play. Last year, Neal Brown had an opportunity, probably the biggest game West Virginia played. He had an opportunity to end up beating Oklahoma. At Oklahoma, their defense played great. But other than that, and that was a lot to do with Spencer Rattler playing poorly in that game on Saturday night. But you look at West Virginia, and this has been kind of a stale college football team the last couple of years. We remember them choking leads against the Marylands of the world. They go to Texas Tech. Yeah, they go to Kansas State. But when are they landing the big win? It's not like this defense is playing out of their minds. It's not like they're making explosive plays on defense. They're small on TV. They need to get bigger. They need to recruit more. And the Big 12 is an awful fit, honestly, for West Virginia. It just is. They should honestly join the ACC. Or they're even more of an American, conference team, because the Big 12, the Big 12 is out. You're taking plane flights out to Manhattan. You're taking flights out to Lubbock, which are brutal stuff. You're going to play Oklahoma. You're going to play Oklahoma State, Iowa State. So now I guess you do get Cincinnati and you do get UCF. So now the Big 12 is expanding, but you're still going to have to go to BYU and play. But the point is with Neal Brown is this has kind of been a discussion to bring up West Virginia football, because now that they get JT Daniels, they get a face. You're gonna be invested into watching West Virginia football. Before that, we remember the quarterback. It was Austin Kendall, who was a 4-star quarterback from the Charlotte area. Ended up going to Oklahoma. It was Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, and then it was Austin Kendall. maybe he interfaced with Baker Mayfield. But then it's been Garrett Green, and Garrett Green's kind of a fun 6-foot quarterback. It's Seth Dagey. Or whatever, Jared Dagey, one of the Dagies. So, the thing is about West Virginia is that they needed pop. You need something on offense. You need a recruiting tool. You need some kind of primetime game. You need excitement at West Virginia. And I believe West Virginia is going to be playing Virginia Tech. And even Virginia Tech, like under Justin Fuente, they beat North Carolina on that opening night. West Virginia needs to play marquee games. They need to market their brand, because the one thing about Morgantown in West Virginia is it's a little tough to market your brand. Now, the campus is honestly really fun. It's very close to Pittsburgh, so it's an hour outside of Pittsburgh, so you can get there. It's in the northern part of the state. And Morgantown, from what you hear, is a really fun college town, and that's what JT Daniels said. For JT Daniels, it was down to here, meaning West Virginia and Oregon State, and this is the right move, because even though Jonathan Smith has put out a much better product at Oregon State has Chance Nolan, who actually is a really fun quarterback, and it's more pro style, so it's totally different. Oregon State does have great weapons, but B.J. Baylor, their running back, I believe, is going to be in the NFL now. It is the Pac-12 conference. But for JT Daniels, the familiarity with Harrell, the ability to be the starter from day one, and also your ability to play in the Big 12, this is just huge for Neil Brown. Neil Brown's a nice guy. He's a nice guy. I thought he would do a lot better from Troy. All right, he was fantastic at Troy. You listen to Neil Brown, you hear him speak for an hour, and you're sold. You're like, damn, let's go. Let's freaking go. But it was tough for Neil Brown because Dana Holgorsen, people want to dog Dana Holgorsen. But Dana Holgorsen kept that thing going at West Virginia, and his offenses were good, and he knows how to adapt. Okay, he's a good football coach, Dana Holgorsen, and they had Rich Rod, and of course they had Geno Smith and Tavon Austin, and their teams were awesome. They had Pat White, the lefty quarterback. Like, their teams in the early 2000s. That was the pinnacle. The late 2000s, that was great West Virginia football. And they have a really good fan base there. They're really good in basketball with Bob Huggins. But Neil Brown, you need a spark. And this is the spark that you get. The spark that you get is getting JT Daniels, is getting a big-name quarterback. Now let's talk about JT Daniels, okay? He got hurt in the first game last year, and then UGA's defense was so good, and Stetson Bennett honestly had a really good season, and you weren't going to mess with that. And it was actually tremendous coaching by Kirby Smart, because he had a lot of chances to put in JT Daniels, but he stayed with Stetson Bennett, and it won him a national championship. Because a lot of people would argue, JT Daniels would have won UGA a national championship. I don't think JT Daniels plays better than Stetson Bennett against Michigan. Stetson Bennett is exactly what you needed. He wasn't going to turn the ball over. He honestly was a more accurate deep ball thrower probably than JT Daniels. I'm not sure about numbers, but in terms of touch, Stetson Bennett could throw the deep ball. Now, who can throw it further? Who has more of an NFL future? There's no doubt it's JT Daniels. 6'3", 6'4", can really throw the football. The kid is still a talent. Going into this last year, he was on NFL draft boards because he's 6'2", because he's a talent. He came out a year early, went to USC, where it was really it was an unstable environment at USC between Graham Harrell, a sitting Duck head coach, and Clay Helton. And then JT Daniels was thrust in the action, and then it's been injuries. He tore his ACL when he was going to be the guy. So it's interesting here. It's very interesting here that it's very interesting that JT Daniels is aligning with Graham Harrell again, because a lot of times you would expect JT Daniels to have a grudge towards the offensive coordinator that put in Keaton Slovis over JT Daniels. But if we got a backyard brawl between JT Daniels and Keaton Slovis, like if you were the college football czar or commissioner, that would be amazing. I'm not sure if that's happening this year, but that would be Keaton versus JT, because Keaton's the young guy who upstaged JT Daniels. Now they're both playing. That's what's going to make it fun. But this was a good move for JT Daniels. He knows this offense really well. You know, you're playing in a Big 12 where it is gettable. Adrian Martinez is another great subplot of the Big 12 Conference. Texas Tech, you got Joey McGuire making his run in his first year. But it's a great coached league. Some of the best coaches, you know, Aranda, Kleinman. You know, you look at Joey Mack. You hope Joey Mack could be really successful. I mean, Luke Fickell's going into this. Gus is going to bring his talents here. Kalani Sitake. So this is a really, you know, now you have at TCU, you also have a coach that was at SMU and Sonny Dykes. So that's even gonna be kind of interesting. Of course, Oklahoma and Texas end up leaving, so Venables versus Steve Sarkisian. You wonder if they're still playing Big 12 football, I believe, this year. But for JT Daniels, this is going to make West Virginia very watchable. It was really the right destination where he will win the job most likely. You have a good offensive coordinator. You now are used to the East Coast, and it's exactly what Neil Brown needs as well. You need a spark. You bring in Graham Harrell, who I like as an offensive coordinator, who's an air raid coach who's going to put the ball in the air a heck of a lot, and you're going to score some points in this air raid. And it's going to be really, really fun. You know, you're going to be able to spread it around and score. And if they have a semblance of defense, they can hopefully get to 7 or 8 wins. They were uninspiring in the bowl game against Minnesota. They got blistered up front. They got abused up front in that game. Absolutely just tormented, and they got absolutely just slaughtered by the University of Minnesota in that bowl game. Wasn't even close. Now, you could say that there was opt-outs or whatever. So for Neil Brown, this is crucial time for JT Daniels and for Neil Brown.